Karmelo Anthony, not that Carmelo Anthony, but a 17-year-old high school track star and standout football athlete, made a decision that would become one of the biggest mistakes of his young life, a decision that made headline news across the nation. Was it self-defense or was it plain cold-blooded murder? This is the tragic story of Carmelo Anthony and the murder of Austin Metcalf. Carmelo Anthony was born May 10, 2008 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The oldest of 4 children, his family later moved to Frisco, Texas in search of a better life. Anthony attended Centennial High School, where he was captain of both the track and football teams. He grew up in an upper middle class neighborhood, held 2 jobs, one at an HEB and the other at Foot Locker, and had no criminal record. By most accounts, Carmelo Anthony was a decent kid, or at least could be perceived as one. He'd received an offer from Texas Southern University, played chess in his free time, and carried a 3.7 GPA. On April 2nd, 2025, a track and field championship event was held at David Kuykendall Stadium in Frisco. It was a spring day, temperatures in the 70s, with passing showers and thunderstorms moving through North Texas. Carmelo and a few of his teammates, without a tent of their own, huddled under a tarp to escape the rain. They sought shelter under a nearby baseball dugout, but were told by a coach they weren't allowed there and had to leave, left once again to stand in the rain. With few options, Carmelo spotted a familiar face under an opposing team's tent, one belonging to the Memorial High School track team. He greeted his friend, dapped hands, and chatted for a bit, using the moment to escape the rain and waited out under their tent. But players on the Memorial team began to notice him, and it became clear he wasn't supposed to be there. They asked him politely at first to leave. Carmelo responded, "You're going to have to make me leave." Tension built and a standoff began. Players repeatedly asked him to go, but Carmelo held his ground. Word reached Austin Metcalf, the team's captain, a well-liked leader, and the football team's MVP. Metcalf approached Carmelo and asked him to leave several times. "Bro, just leave. You can't be here. We don't want you here." Witnesses say Metcalf didn't want to fight and seemed calm throughout, but tensions kept rising. Several witnesses noticed Carmelo quietly slipping his hand into his backpack. Metcalf spotted it and said, "Bro, you don't have anything in that bag. It's Frisco." Carmelo replied, "Touch me and see what happens." Metcalf responded with what one witness described as a soft, almost reflexive football-style push. Not hard, not clearly aggressive. That push triggered a split-second decision that would change Carmelo Anthony's life forever. He responded with a fast thrust of a pocket knife into Metcalf's chest. Austin fell backward, and what many believe were his last words were, "Oh my God, I've been stabbed." Carmelo broke away from the tent as chaos erupted around him, moving down through the bleachers, seemingly stunned by what he'd just done, and heading toward the stadium exit. He wasn't fleeing in any serious sense. Officers located him easily. An arresting officer spotted him and told him to put his hands up. With his hands raised, Carmelo said, "I told him not to touch me. I was protecting myself." He was emotional, crying hysterically. When the officer radioed that he had the alleged suspect in custody, Carmelo said, "I'm not alleged. I did it." Sitting in the back of the patrol car, he reportedly asked whether Austin was going to be okay and whether what he'd done could be considered self-defense. The story spread across the country almost instantly, opening up racial, political, and legal divides. Much of the online discourse fixated on the fact that Austin was white and Carmelo is black, and the case quickly became a flashpoint for arguments that had little to do with the actual facts in front of the jury. Both the prosecution and the defense would later tell jurors directly that race had no place in deciding the case. Courts allowed Carmelo and his family to relocate to an undisclosed location after fundraising efforts brought in more than $500,000 to cover legal costs. But the relocation came alongside death threats and racial hatred directed at the family. Anthony was indicted on a charge of first-degree murder by a Collin County grand jury, a charge carrying a possible sentence of 5 to 99 years or life in prison. Because he was 17 at the time, Texas law required he be charged as an adult. Carmelo maintained throughout that he'd acted in self-defense, not committed murder. So which was it? Self-defense or first-degree murder? To understand the case, it helps to know how Texas law draws that line. Self-defense versus murder under Texas law. Texas law allows a person to use force, including deadly force, only when they reasonably believe it's immediately necessary to protect themselves from another person's use of unlawful force. Deadly force specifically requires a reasonable belief that it's necessary to prevent imminent death, serious bodily injury, or certain violent felonies. The key word is reasonable. The threat has to be one an ordinary person in that situation would perceive as posing serious danger, not just any physical contact or verbal confrontation. Murder, by contrast, is causing someone's death either intentionally/knowingly or while intending serious bodily injury and committing an act clearly dangerous to human life. The core legal question in Karmelo's case was whether a push, even an aggressive one, could reasonably be perceived as a threat justifying a knife to the chest, or whether the response was disproportionate to the actual danger he faced. In his own mind, Karmelo Anthony believed his actions fell within the law, but he deeply misjudged what the law actually required. A shove alone doesn't justify a stabbing. The threat has to rise to the level of serious bodily harm or death before deadly force is legally justified. His understanding of self-defense and the legal standard for it were two very different things. The trial, Karmelo's trial, began June 1st, 2026 in Collin County with nearly 600 prospective jurors summoned before a panel was seated. A panel, notably, with no black jurors in a county where roughly 1 in 8 residents is black. That detail alone became its own point of controversy once the verdict came down. More than 20 prosecution witnesses testified over the course of the trial. Multiple witnesses took the stand and nearly all of them identified Karmelo as the aggressor. They described the push from Austin Metcalf as soft, a football push, even a tap. One particularly notable witness was the friend Karmelo had greeted under the tent that day. On the stand, that witness downplayed the friendship, even after the defense presented photos of the two of them together and pointed out they'd hung out at least 3 times over a 3-week span. The witness maintained they'd really only crossed paths when Karmelo's girlfriend, a mutual friend, was around, and that they weren't especially close. Like the others, this witness agreed Karmelo had been the aggressor. The defense leaned on the idea that Karmelo in a split second genuinely feared for his safety when confronted by a larger student. The prosecution rejected that framing outright, arguing Anthony had escalated a verbal dispute into a fatal one. A shove does not justify a knife. The trial lasted about 9 days before both sides rested. The jury deliberated for roughly 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict on the charge of first-degree murder, rejecting a lesser manslaughter option that had also been available to them. The sentencing phase followed almost immediately. Karmelo's mother, Kayla Hayes, asked the jury for mercy, telling them he would always be her firstborn and her baby. It didn't move the jury. They sentenced Karmelo Anthony to 35 years in prison with parole eligibility after 17. Before the sentence was handed down, Austin Metcalf's family delivered victim impact statements directly to Karmelo. His mother spoke about the future the family would never get to see. His father spoke about grief, not as sadness, but as rage, describing it as something that had fundamentally changed who he was as a person. The appeal for the Metcalf family, that sentence felt like the end of the story. For Karmelo's, it was only the beginning of the next fight. His legal team filed notice of appeal almost immediately, and Anthony has since requested a court-appointed attorney, citing an inability to afford continued private representation. His family has publicly maintained he did not receive a fair trial and has vowed to keep fighting the conviction. As of now, the appeal is still working its way through the courts, meaning, legally speaking, this story isn't fully closed. Closing, this is one of the saddest cases imaginable. 2 families effectively lost a child, one to death, the other to a lengthy prison sentence. Karmelo's dreams and future vanished in a split second. A talented, bright kid who genuinely believed he was defending himself made a catastrophic decision, one that has cost him and everyone around him dearly. And with an appeal still pending, the legal chapter of this story may not be finished yet. Here's something the jury never heard during the making of this video. It was discovered before trial. Prosecutors and Anthony's original defense team agreed to keep both boys' past out of the courtroom to focus on the stabbing, not their histories. That agreement held for over a year. Then in August 2026, during Anthony's bid for a new trial, it all surfaced. Austin first. Court records alleged that as children, Austin and his twin brother Hunter spray-painted racist graffiti, including KKK, Hail Hitler, and a racial slur, and were placed on a year of juvenile probation. Records also allege repeated slurs at school, bullying a black classmate, and physical altercations, including punching a female student. School files reportedly show suspensions, an incident cursing at a teacher, and counseling for anger issues. Now Karmelo, prosecutors' own filings used to argue against a new trial, alleged that on the morning of the stabbing, his girlfriend told a staff member he'd been driving by her house and wouldn't let her end the relationship. The filings also allege past admissions to punching people, and a 2023 text about shooting up a school followed in the same conversation by him saying he'd never do it. None of this was tested in front of a jury. These are allegations from a post-conviction hearing, not facts proven at trial. For over a year, the public got one story: 2 boys, 1 moment, 1 villain. That was never the whole picture. My personal conclusion: these were 2 badass kids that crossed paths at the wrong time.